President and Vice-Chancellor, as public orator, may I present Chris Keates, a candidate for an honorary degree. In the heyday of the potteries in Stoke-on-Trent, it was normal for everyone to walk to work from their homes to a local pottery factory down the street. People did not travel far from their neighbourhood, and it was therefore highly unusual for a local girl like Chris Keates to go away to university, and not to the nearest one in Keele, but miles away in Leicester. Chris came from a family that valued education. Her mother and her uncle were teachers. Leicester offered Chris the opportunity to study geology and ancient history, but to her delight, she also discovered she could major in archaeology, which had always been a passion of hers. Chris remembers with great pleasure taking part in a major excavation of the Lunt Roman fort in Coventry. On campus, Chris's abiding memory is of the Attenborough Tower with its Paternoster lift, and the wind tunnel between it and the Charles Wilson building, where a gale blew whatever the weather. After graduation, Chris did teacher training at Birmingham University. Her first teaching practice was at an inner-city school in Small Heath. She did so well that the school offered her a permanent job, which she accepted. Chris stayed in the job for 12 years and remembers these as some of the most rewarding times of her teaching career. The high aspiration and appreciation of parents, despite the problems of inner-city deprivation, were inspiring. Educational visits, even around Birmingham, were a great event for most of her pupils, many of whom had never visited the city centre. Chris then moved to take up a post as head of humanities at a school in King's Heath and eventually became an advisory teacher. Throughout her years as a teacher, Chris has been active in the Union of Women Teachers, which in 1976 merged with the NIS to form NIS-UWT, the Teachers' Union. Her key motivation was the concept of equality and workers' rights. At that time, teachers were trying to educate pupils against a background of immense social changes, whilst being undervalued by government and employers. Chris always held the view that if teachers are valued, they are better able to focus on looking after the pupils they teach. This concept of putting teachers first has been at the heart of Chris's motivation and her work in NIS-UWT. In 1998, Chris became Assistant Secretary of NIS-UWT. One of her major tasks was to lead on the newly elected Labour government's Green Paper, Teachers Meeting the Challenge of Change. A key idea of the Green Paper was an improvement in the pay of teachers by the introduction of a performance threshold. Chris was instrumental in developing a handbook on how to make a successful application to cross the threshold to a higher salary. About 250,000 teachers were successful in this process and consequently received a higher salary. The handbook was, of course, only available to NIS-UWT members, and this resulted in a vast surge in membership applications. The 2003 National Workforce Agreement forged a unique social partnership with the Labour government, which ushered in historic improvements to teachers' contracts. One of these changes was guaranteed planning, preparation and assessment time within the school day, unprecedented for many teachers, particularly in primary schools. Looking back, this was a golden period of progress in teachers' pay and conditions. Chris went on to become Union Deputy Secretary in 2001, and in 2004, she was elected by the membership as NIS-UWT's first female General Secretary. In a union where 75% of the membership are women, she was immensely proud to have been entrusted with this critical role. Chris has always championed equality. During the centenary of women's suffrage, she was chosen as one of the 100 women's suffrage champions by Oxford University Women in Humanities project. Chris has always been committed to the wider trade union movement and has been a member of the TUC General Council for many years. She is also a great internationalist and is very proud of NAS UWT's affiliation to Education International, which is a global education union representing over 30 million teachers around the world. It is an organisation which fights oppression of teachers and teacher trade unionists, which unfortunately continues in too many countries around the world today. The NAS UWT is not a party political organisation, but it campaigns politically on behalf of members, championing issues which affect teachers' working lives. One such issue is the current plight of migrant teachers, who, because of the current pay policy, will be unlikely to aspire to £35,000 per year, the threshold the government has stipulated they must reach in 5 years to enable them to remain in the UK. Consequently, although the numbers are difficult to estimate, more than 20,000 teachers could face deportation, not only devastating their lives, but also having a major impact on the lives of young people at a time of a national crisis in teacher supply. Chris is at present courageously defending the employment rights of migrant teachers, who make such a valuable contribution to our education system. She is lobbying for teaching to be an exempted profession from these harsh and unfair regulations. We are proud to regard Chris Keates as one of our graduates. After an outstanding career in teaching, she is a superb head of NAS UWT, the largest union representing teachers and head teachers. Chris successfully stood for re-election as General Secretary on 3 occasions unopposed, which speaks volumes for the confidence of her members in her. Chris Keates has had a major impact on the value we put upon teachers, and through that process she has affected all of us who have benefited from our education. President and Vice-Chancellor, on the recommendation of the Senate and Council, I present Chris Keates that you may confer upon her the Honorary Degree of Doctor of Laws.
Well done. Well done.
President and Vice-Chancellor, it is an immense honour for me to receive this honorary degree and to be here today. And I'm particularly pleased that I'm receiving this award in the context of seeing so many young and talented people receiving the fruits of their hard work, many of whom will be starting careers in teaching. That has given me a particular pleasure this morning to see that. I've spent my whole lifetime in education as a pupil, as a student, as a teacher, and for the last 20 years as a representative of teachers and head teachers. People tell me I should get out more. But at every stage of that journey, teachers have been a critical part of my life. My mother and sister, both teachers and head teachers, the teachers who taught me at school and university, the teachers and head teachers who, as members of the NAS UWT, have put their trust in me to champion and to represent them. All of this has fueled my passion for education and my deep belief that education is not only a human right, but a public good. And it's also a cornerstone of a democratic society, an essential element in the framework of social rights of children, of young people, and of adults. And I equally, and just as firmly, believe that a just and democratic society depends on a healthy and free trade union movement, campaigning for social and economic justice, fairness, and equality. I've been extremely fortunate, therefore, to be able to combine those twin passions, a belief in the fundamental importance of education and in trade unionism, and to represent teachers whose contribution, as all evidence shows, and every parent and carer will testify to, matters most to pupils' learning. I've had the good fortune to be able to be part of the best of times in our public education system, particularly in the first decade of this century, where every child matters was at the heart of government policy, and there was a clear recognition and understanding that teachers' pay and conditions of service are inextricably linked to high standards of education. Genuine efforts, therefore, were made at that time to recognise and reward teachers as highly skilled professionals and to provide them with the working conditions which enabled them to focus on their core role of teaching and leading learning. But I have also, unfortunately, experienced the worst of times in the history of our public education service, and now is one of those. Children facing grinding poverty, homelessness, disadvantage. Teachers every day picking up the pieces of broken lives and stolen life chances at no small cost to themselves. Access to educational opportunity, increasingly based on parents' ability to pay, fundamentally compromising a key principle of our great public service ethos. Deregulation of the responsibility for public education and the deregulation and the disempowerment of our teaching profession and the failure to respect and value teachers, which has led to the worst crisis in teacher recruitment and retention since World War II. It's at times like these, when the challenges are immense, that it's good to reflect and to seek inspiration from the struggle of others and show how people can triumph over adversity. The centenary of the suffragette movement last year provided one such opportunity. I was proud to be one of the 100 of Oxford University's Women in Humanities Project suffrage champions, and as part of this, I was asked to reflect on a woman who had most inspired me. And there were many that I could have chosen from, but I actually chose Sophie Scholl, a student at the University of Munich and an anti-Nazi political activist in the White Rose, a non-violent resistance group in Nazi Germany during the Second World War. Sophie was captured by the Gestapo, tortured and finally beheaded. She was 21 when she died. As Sophie faced execution, she said, "Stand up for what you believe in, even if you are standing alone." Now, Sophie did that in circumstances unlike any we, thankfully, may ever have to face today. But her words are ones that I have drawn on many occasions, and so has the union I represent. And many of the successes we've achieved during some of the most difficult times in education policy, many of the successes we've achieved on behalf of teachers, such as the groundbreaking contractual changes, the right to legally challenge adverse management practices, the right to refuse to teach violent and disruptive pupils. These are many successes, and we've gained these when we stood alone, often against the prevailing views of the day, for what we believe to be right. And that relentless focus on putting teachers first, which has equalities at its heart, and meeting the needs of teachers to empower them to focus on the needs of children and the young people that they teach. Teachers do an amazing job, day in, day out, nurturing and developing the talent of our children and young people, the future of our country. Teaching is a complex, multifaceted professional activity, which is simultaneously an art, a science, and a craft. The art of teaching is about being responsive and creative and developing intuitive capabilities. The craft of teaching is about mastering the full range of skills and practices needed by teachers to discharge their professional responsibilities effectively. The science of teaching is about using research and other forms of evidence to inform decisions about how to teach. The many great teachers we are fortunate to have across this country make it look easy. This year marks the centenary of the NASUWT, 100 years of being the voice of teachers. To be able to champion the rights and entitlements of teachers, teachers who change lives and build nations is an immense privilege for me and for the NAS UWT. I am grateful to have had the opportunity to do this, and therefore to be recognised for that work with this award today is the greatest honour for me, for which you have my deepest thanks and appreciation. Thank you.